As Ozzy once said, no more weed? Yes, before we all go off and root for the Bills because all of the other area teams are out. Time to take a moment, play Debbie Downer, and talk about the moratorium that's going to effectively preclude the sale of recreational cannabis in New Milford for a year. One topic show, and the only two things I'm going to plug for tonight are my Mike Reed's channel. Link is in this video's description. It's a channel where I read literature, I read books. I finally have time now to get back to it, so I've recorded, I think, 5 or 6 videos, so I'll be working on that channel soon. So do check that channel out if that's something you guys are interested in. We cover mostly boring stuff like philosophy and economics and sometimes some Star Wars. So if you guys like reading, if you guys like books, that's a good channel to check out. So link is in this video description. Check that out. And the other thing is that I have been on a hiatus. I'm only doing this because I think this one topic is something that this community may want to really hear about, especially if they don't know about what's going on here with this sort of thing. I'm not sure where the community stands on this issue, but we'll get into that throughout the course of the show. And yes, I've been on a hiatus because one of the things I'm doing is I'm working on a much, much bigger project. I don't know if you guys remember the Community Center Adventure, the hour and 45-minute, the feature-length documentary I put together on the Community Center, but it's something along those lines, and it's going to be a ton of research. It's going to mean setting up interviews. It's going to mean proper lighting and recording. It's going to be a big ordeal, and hopefully I can get it done before the growing season starts. That's how long it's going to take. So if you would like to volunteer for that sort of a thing, please do reach out to me. Let me know if that's something you're interested in. Would really love the help, at least with the research end. And it would also be helpful to have somebody help me just basically lugging around when it comes to things like just lugging around gear. And, I don't know if anybody's new to the show. Hopefully we do have some new folks to the show. Since this is kind of an interesting topic, one of the things I'm trying to work into the show is not having me be the one to do the actual sharing. So again, as far as the help is concerned, really use you guys' help with the sharing of these videos on Facebook, on YouTube. We're streaming to both. So if you want to jump onto YouTube instead of Facebook, if you prefer to watch in 1080p, you can watch on YouTube. If you prefer the chat that takes place on Facebook, both YouTube and Facebook have a chat feature. You can watch either one. Both links are in this video's description. And I wonder if anyone out there who's watching has the guts to share this video to the New Milford, Connecticut page with 21,000 members, because that, I think, is how the word is going to get spread about this topic. And again, you don't have to really be for or against it necessarily, because I think this is a topic that is of serious interest to both sides. And we're going to get more into that whole thing and what I think of the process, what I think of the whole the ordinance that's being proposed. But what we do on this show is I like to start with the what, then go to the why, talk about what you guys can do depending on where you guys stand on these issues, and then get into my opinion. So yes, I am going to inject my opinion into this conversation because this is what this show is all about. We talk about local news and politics on this show. And then we're going to cap everything off like we always do with live Q&A. That's your opportunity to jump into the show, to jump in and hold my proverbial feet to the fire. Well, we always read your questions live. So get those questions in the chat right away so you don't lose track of them, so you don't forget about them. If you want to I wanted to turn the show into something of a call-in. I wanted to allow the show to have something of a call-in feature. So link is in this video's description, and I'm going to actually pump this out onto YouTube right now. As soon as I get my cursor back, here we go. And on Facebook, if you'd like to have effectively call into the show, link is now in the chat to join in the Discord server, which will allow that functionality and allow those features. And we're going to as I said, we would start with the what, and the what is the memorandum, is the moratorium on the sale of recreational cannabis, in the town of New Milford. And let me bring up that conversation. So this originated from the January 9th, 2023 meeting. You can, if you guys want to watch the entire video, the section's almost an hour long, and that is on the Town of New Milford's website. All you have to do is go to YouTube channel. All I have to do is go to YouTube, type in Town of New Milford, and you can see the whole thing. So we're going to be showing excerpts from that meeting. to get into the details of what's behind all of this, what's motivating this, what the thinking is, what the process is going to look like, what you can do if you're in favor of the thing to show support for the thing, what you can do if you're opposed to the moratorium to demonstrate your opposition to the moratorium and maybe convince people to change their minds one way or the other. So first things first, we need to define what a moratorium is broadly before we get into this one specifically. A moratorium is just a temporary stoppage. What that means is, in the case of this, is that you have an ordinance that's going to prohibit the sale of cannabis and cannabis products in New Milford for recreational purposes for a certain amount of time. That's what a moratorium is. A moratorium necessarily has some form of an expiration. It may not be an exact date. It may be contingent upon another action. But in the case of this one, it's going to be a 1-year moratorium. And to be clear, this is a moratorium on the sale of recreational marijuana in this town, not medicinal. It's going to have no effect whatsoever on medicinal. So for those of you that are bringing up the concerns over like legitimate medicinal needs, which are real, and that's where I will inject my opinion. They're real. They're undeniably real. There are legitimate medicinal purposes for cannabis. They're not going to be affected by any of this. It's just the recreational sale. The rules regarding its consumption are still the same. So when a store opens up in Danbury, if this moratorium goes through, you will still be able to go to Danbury, bring your weed into New Milford, and get high. The other thing to point out is that because it's a moratorium, and the way that moratoria are laid out within the Connecticut general statutes for the municipalities, is that especially this one is going to be amendable, which means it can be truncated if the town council decides that a year is too long. If they've seen 6 months go by and they're like, you know what, we want to have a weed store. We want to have a weed store in town, but we want to allow a weed store to come into town. And because it's amendable too, they can at any point basically say, we need to extend the moratorium. And we're going to get more into that in tonight's show. So just keep all of that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is the ordinance process. This isn't just the town council votes for this thing and boom, it goes through. This has to be taken care of through the proper ordinance process. There's multiple ways that can manifest itself. The way that this one is manifesting itself means that tomorrow night at 6:30, there's going to be a public hearing to take public comment specific to this ordinance at 6:30 p.m. in the E. Paul Martin room. So if you are in favor of it, you should go there and you should express that thought. You should express that opinion. The most important thing in a system of governance is consent. And, if that's what the community thinks, then that's what the community thinks. If they don't want the weed stores in town, they don't want the weed stores in town. If you want the weed stores to be allowed to be in town, then you should go to the meeting tomorrow night and say so, and say this is incorrect. We should not be approving this ordinance. And regardless of all of that, the town council is then later on in the meeting that follows, the regular town council meeting that follows at 7:00, they're going to make a decision one way or the other. And that's, at this point, the extent of the process. So you guys have tomorrow. If you guys are going to oppose this bill, you guys have till tomorrow to make that happen. And by the way, for those who aren't going to be able to make it, the meeting, like I always do, will be streamed to Facebook and YouTube. You can go to the town's YouTube channel. And if you're not going to be able to make it, you're not going to be able to offer public comment. So you'll have to go in person to offer that public comment. But if you want to watch from home, you can do that. It's again, this is on the town's YouTube channel. Just go type in Town in Milford in YouTube. And, tomorrow night, this will be the first thing that shows up. It should still be the first thing that shows up. And it'll also be available on YouTube as well. Additionally, wow, I didn't do that. So additionally, I did manage to get, let me get my notes out. I did manage to get the agenda for the public hearing that's at 6:30 onto my Google Drive, so you guys can check that out too. I did put the link in this video's description. So it's a ridiculously short agenda. Here, let's zoom in so you guys can follow along. Well, let's see if it'll allow me to zoom in. Here we go. Legal notice, Town of Milford warning, notice of public hearing, January 23rd, 2023. Please take notice that pursuant to Section 405 and 406 of the Town Charter, the New Milford Town Council will hold a public hearing to hear public comment relating to the following proposed ordinance. New, so it means a new ordinance, moratorium on cannabis establishments in the town of New Milford. It is proposed that the ordinance be added to the New Milford Code of Ordinance as authorized by said charter sections 405 and 406 and Chapter 98 of the General Statutes that refers to the Connecticut State Statutes. Said public hearing will be held in the E. Paul Martin Room at New Milford Town Hall, 10 Main Street, at 6:30 p.m. on January 23rd, 2023. That's tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. A copy of the proposed ordinance is on file at in the town clerk's office and available for examination. That wasn't filed until very late Friday afternoon, so I don't have that, but I will do my best to get that out to everybody in time for tomorrow night, or at least as early as I reasonably can get to it. And the other thing that we have to talk about before we get into the actual the meat of the conversation surrounding this proposed ordinance in the first place is that we do have to talk about the context surrounding all of this. And that is one of the things that should be pointed out is that the sales were made legal as of January 10th, 2023. This is the day after that January 9th Town Council meeting where the Town Council proposed effectively instructed the town attorneys to draft an ordinance to be voted on tomorrow night to prohibit the sale of marijuana, to prohibit the sale of cannabis and cannabis-related products for recreational purposes for 1 year. That would be that 1 year moratorium. This comes on the heels too of the ban on smoking and vaping of town properties, which was something that we covered on this show quite extensively. In fact, it was basically the only thing we talked about on the November 20th, 2022 episode of this show. Let me know if you guys want me to drop the link to this video in the chat if you guys want to talk about it. But we did talk about this, and I do realize that if you were to look at things through the lens of a vacuum, then the one thing, so the prohibition of the smoking and vaping of cannabis and cannabis-related products on town properties without extreme legitimate medical exemptions. There's some, in a vacuum, there is a pathway to being okay with that, right? From even a libertarian perspective. And we talked about it ad nauseum on that show. But these two things are not existing in a vacuum. One came 2 months after the other. In fact, I think it was just under 2 months after the other. So we do have to make everybody, we do have to apprise, we do actually have to talk about the fact, and it's an undeniable fact, that this is what has preceded the thing. This is the air that surrounds the thing. No pun intended. And, I know what a lot of people are going to, so the next question then, of course, is the why. If it's legal at the state level, now it's not a defined right, which means that it's just not illegal. There's a difference between it being a right and it being not illegal. And we can talk about that another time. But where are we? If it's legal at the state level, why would you have the moratorium? And if you're in favor, if you just want to get rid of it, why not just full-on ban the thing? Well, here is the impetus that Pete Bass explains for, let me bring this back up. This is the originating impetus for having this conversation in the first place, and which is going to eventually lead us to this proposed ordinance. Go, Pete.
So I was talking with Randy. For those that know, there's cannabis is now a legal sale in the state of Connecticut as of today, right, Randy?
Yep.
Randy
DeBell is our town
talking
attorney.
to Randy, there's been new legislation always continues to come out. So I'm speaking with Randy. We've also had a couple of people that have expressed interest in opening up cannabis dispensaries here. One of the things I'd ask Randy is kind of what's the next steps for the council. Zoning is kind of opined on the use, how far away it would have to be from certain structures, whether it be schools, right, Randy, and whatnot. And I said to Randy, okay, what are the protections as far as the town? And Randy said, well, really there is no protection unless we make a protection. Today, somebody could open up a shop right now if we want.
Yep.
So how do we protect the town? How do we protect the people in the town? What are some of the things that we need to do? And I'll let Randy talk a little bit about it. And then we have, I think, 3 options that the council can weigh on as far as what are the next steps. What do we want to do?
So the main impetus is that we don't know if there will be further regulation. And I'm guessing from the context here, since I was actually there at the meeting and I can go off memory, that he's protecting whom? The town is protecting whom? Is it protecting the business owner that wants to perform the sale? Who is it protecting, and why is it their duty to perform that protection? And these are legitimate questions that can be asked of the ordinance, and there may be legitimate answers in favor of the ordinance to that question. But we need to get more. We need to go on with the what here, because Pete did suggest that a town attorney, Randy DeBella, suggested that there were 3 ways to address this question of what the state is going to do about it, because we honestly don't know what the state is going to be doing about it moving forward. This is a legitimate question. This is legitimately up in the air. We genuinely don't know what's going to happen in Hartford over the next even 6 months when it comes to potential further legislation.
The town legislative body, in our case here is the town council, can elect to do nothing and let zoning handle on a use basis, that is where it can be, where it can't be, or let zoning deny it, saying there shall be no sales, which is a tough thing to do because it's appealable, and you're having a zoning regulation scheme like ours, which is a permissive scheme. It says, unless we say you can do it, you can't. You're going to have that commission do a regulation saying, well, you can't do this, which is absolutely in opposite of the schematic of our zoning regulations. I don't recommend it here. Or you can do a ban, an outright ban, or a moratorium.
So remember, there are actually 3 options that could have been chosen here. What wound up getting chosen was the moratorium, and we're going to get into that. But one of the options that could have been chosen, if you don't want to have the legal recreational weed sales here in New Milford, is you could just have a ban. Right? He just said it right there. And if you wanted to, you could have done nothing. And it seems like the rationale that was chosen for the pathway that they wound up taking was that they don't know what the state is going to do. And I know what you guys are thinking, because I've spoken with you guys, and I know the obvious response from you guys we're going to have to address is, so? I mean, if you ban it, you ban it. If you let it go, you let it go. The state will do what the state's going to do, and there's nothing you can do about that. So, what's the rationale for this even being 1 year when it could have been 10 years? Because we don't know what the state's going to do in 8 years. We don't know what the state's going to do in 5 days, let alone 8 years. So why have the moratorium? If you're just opposed to the thing, ban it. If you're not, you don't have to be in favor of the thing, but if you're not opposed to the thing, then get out of the way. Get out of the way of the private sector and the small business that wants to come to New Milford, right? And I guess the rationale was that, there is a legitimate case to be made that when it comes to the moratorium, the process is easier to amend. If we do an outright ban, the process that goes along with producing an outright ban is much harder to revoke. That's true. That's true, again, in a vacuum. But then, so is doing nothing, right? If the moratorium process is this easy to go through, then you could do nothing and do the moratorium when it becomes necessary, when it becomes obvious that you have to do the moratorium, right? The process is easier to amend than, say, a ban, but is it easier to amend than doing nothing and letting things work out the way they're going to work out? And by the way, this is the rationale that's being presented. And if you think I'm kidding, I'm not.
So the moratorium is a lesser than a ban. It's a miniature ban. It's a temporary ban. So therefore, since it's less than the authority that you have to ban entirely, it's authorized. A number of towns have done that because they want to see what the Department of Public Health and Department of Consumer Protection does with regulations. As you know, there's a dearth of regulation. There's not much out there. that may be the way to go if you don't want to ban outright. Now, don't forget, there's a taxation scheme too. I haven't seen it. The locals are supposed to be able to impose a partial tax, as you know. I think it was 3%, but I haven't seen the schematic of that either.
So the options are unclear, the future is muddy, and we do have the opportunity to have a moratorium,
Yes.
which would allow us to see what goes and what doesn't and what
What
happens.
works for other towns.
Right, yeah.
And
Bear in
and if we
mind,
get
the
to the
state-
end of that time frame, we can
But
always
it
extend it
doesn't-
further if we still don't have clarity.
But yes,
Yes.
and we can still,
Depending how it's written, yeah.
at the end or in the middle, as you said, by virtue of legislative or whatever. But at the end of that time, if we still felt that nothing was really settled to the whatever council membership is made up of, they could continue that. So it isn't a ban, it's a moratorium.
So levy the local tax when the state makes it clear you can? Like, aren't we supposed to be kind of like opposed to taxes when we can avoid it? I mean, so apply this state level legislation, whatever that might be, when it comes? I mean, how would this be any different from like in 2009 and 10 when smartphones started to proliferate? I mean, you could say the same thing about tobacco and alcohol. Like, there was nothing on the books about from Hartford about smartphones. Right, and if you're going to tell me that smartphones aren't the vice that weed is, are you sure? Are you sure these things aren't like one of the most addictive and vicious things there are on planet Earth? Right? Like I am not a fan of the way that smartphones are treated, and that's why I had a flip phone until like 2019, right, 2020 or so. So again, you could apply the same thing to tobacco, right? Like, we don't know what the state's going to be doing in the next 8 months about tobacco. I mean, we have a long history of what the state has done when it comes to tobacco and alcohol, but in the prohibition area, when the prohibition on alcohol was lifted, like, the prohibition was lifted. We opened the doors. We didn't wait for Hartford to make more legislation. We opened the doors. Just like you would with any other, again, with the cell phone store. Oh, excuse my microphone. Wouldn't be an episode of the Mike Sennello Show without technical difficulties. When smartphones came out, did we have a moratorium on the sale of smartphones? No, we didn't. And I'm not saying that this is my position. I'm just saying that these arguments, these rationales, aren't really the world's best rationale. You'd be better off arguing on principle that you don't want the sale, period, so ban it, right? If you're opposed or in favor, I mean, again, if you're opposed or in favor of its legality, this rationale makes no sense. Both sides of this issue should be kind of opposed to this rationale. You could just ban it outright or allow it outright and let the state do what it's going to do or not do. I mean, I don't have to opine yet. I don't have to insert what my take is on this matter yet. These are just objectively weak arguments. You know, one thing that did come out clear, thank God, since we got something clear out of it, is that this was just simply not going to be applied to medicinal marijuana. So those who are in favor of a more relaxed system when it comes to the treatment of marijuana in this town, like, there's no point to come out with a straw man when it comes to medicinal. This is explicitly not going to apply to medicinal consumption.
So there's no establishment in
Sale
the
of it.
town even for medical marijuana.
Would the moratorium cover the medical?
No.
No. I
Well,
didn't
you
think so.
could, but it doesn't make
No,
sense.
but it doesn't now.
Because we have a whole scheme of zoning regulations for medical marijuana.
Right, okay, just checking.
And secondly, it's prescribed medication at that point. It's in the nature of medication.
Yeah, so at the very end, I hope you guys caught that. He said it's a prescribed medication. And you might have a serious litigation case on your hands if you had if we put in a proviso to preclude the sale of medicinal cannabis products, because then it becomes a legitimate, prescriptive claim, and you probably are going to get sued on that matter. He's trying to avoid saying you're going to get sued and you're probably going to lose this case because he's our town attorney, and he doesn't want to say that on the record that if they do this you're going to get sued and they're going to lose the case, because you're basically giving an advantage to whoever's going to sue you by saying that. And there's also legit already clear legal precedent on what towns can and can't allow when it comes to legitimate medicine. So no, it wouldn't even make sense. It may not be legal, and it just simply wouldn't make sense to include medicinal sales in the in the moratorium. However, he did mention that there are no applications to. There's no medicinal shops in town. There's no pending applications. There have been some very informal inquiries and some very informal, signals of interest, but nothing that's like on the books or pending. And that might be because of what it already takes to to legally sell marijuana in the state. Not even for recreational purposes, because it's basically the same licensure and the same protected guild system for the medicinal sales as well, right? And everybody in the room that night was extremely aware of what it takes from the applicant's end before you even get to what New Milford has to say on the matter.
In order for somebody to decide tomorrow morning that they want to open a dispensary, non-medical dispensary, they have to have a license, correct?
You have to have a state license.
That's what I mean, a state of Connecticut license to do so.
Correct.
Okay.
They don't need a license from the town.
Yeah, somebody asked me this, that this would be a great way to make some money. I guess I could open one up. I said, no, I don't think so.
Do you know how much it costs to get that license?
It costs a lot. I think up to $1 million.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I thought
Yes.
even to get considered, it was 25
Right.
grand.
And then in addition to that,
But-
other people
but-
who work for you also have to have different licenses. because-
Yes, that's
Sorry,
right.
I know this because of Colorado and a son
And
who's
in
in.
Massachusetts too. My son has a cultivator's
does
license in
mine.
Massachusetts because he works for a company up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy's working there to get licensed.
Yes.
So I don't know.
It's not that easy to do.
And she's not wrong, and everybody in the room understands that it's an incredibly prohibitive process. Now, this isn't an argument in favor of one side or the other when it comes to the thing, but it should be known that it's already an incredibly prohibitive process from the state to even get to the point where you're filing your applications with the town of New Milford. And to be clear, we have to explain the process here now. Because this was a long-winded conversation when it came to the process at that town council meeting. I've already explained what you guys are going to be facing tomorrow, which is a public hearing and a town council meeting. It's on the agenda for the town council meeting, which means that they will make a decision. They don't technically have to, but they will make one. I promise you that, one way or the other. And the public hearing will be there for you to offer your input tomorrow night at 6:30. And if you guys want people to know about that, then you guys got to share things like this video. You guys got to make that available. So again, I don't know if anybody's had the guts yet to do it, but if somebody is out there that has the guts, more power to them to share this video on the New Milford, Connecticut page. The other thing that's going to happen, so as far as when the moratorium would take effect, it would take effect 21 days after publication by the rules regarding the effective dates of ordinances passed down from Hartford to the town of New Milford. So even tomorrow night, even if this goes unanimously through, the moratorium goes through unanimously, then the ordinance has to be published, which technically wouldn't happen until Friday. And then it would be 21 days after that publication that the ordinance would take effect. And to be clear, in the meantime, since it wouldn't take effect until 21 days after it even gets published, it would be at least 21 days after, probably Friday. What would happen if somebody wanted to file an application in the meantime, knowing that there aren't any really even in the works right now?
So tomorrow's the day, and we want to sleep on it. So somebody comes along and they start to do the work through zoning, and they have a license, and we decide at our next meeting to take this up. Not that anybody could probably get it all done in 2 weeks, but let's just say, if somebody started the process, does it entitle them to continue if we were to put the moratorium in place in 2 weeks or 4 weeks?
The name of the case is Murphy against the town of Bridgewater. Remember that case?
Yeah.
In which they changed the zoning regulation after he filed an application, so they wouldn't pay attention to it. And they got hit for $1 million.
Okay, so would this be zoning then? Because we're the legislative body?
That was a zoning case.
Right.
This may not be a zoning case,
Right.
but it's the same principle.
Yes. but
Because
we're
it's
the-
deprivation by legislation.
Okay.
And that's what they claimed in the Bridgewater case, is that his right to proceed was deprived by regulation. Same principle.
So that means that if there was an application that had gone, if there was an applicant that had gone through all the state proceedings, gotten all the licensure, somehow secured the funding from a lender and went through at least some of the processes here in New Milford and filed a formal application here in New Milford for that permit tomorrow, if they did that tomorrow morning, then they would honestly have a legitimate claim toward that, even if this moratorium goes through. And Randy, again, as the town attorney, has a duty not to basically explain what the litigation process would be to the litigant, right? Because he's supposed to be acting on, he's supposed to be serving in the best interests of the town, of this actual body, right? So if somebody's suing the town, he can't be like laying out that pathway, but he was very clearly implying that if somebody did that, then they would absolutely have a case to remain open and selling weed for recreational purposes during that 1-year moratorium. Now, he also made it clear that the application has to be made in what I'm going to call good faith, as in you have to actually go through this process. This can't be done just to tie up the moratorium. This can't be done just to present what is effectively frivolous litigation. There must be merit to the application, right? That you're actually intending to do this, that you've actually demonstrated real intent and what's called in law reliance on the pending, we'll call it legislation, right? Because it was pending for all those months. And if you went through all that process, through all those months and took out that risk, you were relying, there was a level of reliance on the good faith of the town to either do their due diligence and start the moratorium prior and start that process prior and make that intention made clear beforehand, or the ban beforehand, but they didn't do that. So this would be what's in law called reliance. There's a lot of case study on this matter. This is basically what he's talking about in this case. Now, again, we've gone through the rationales, we've gone through the thinking, we've gone through the thing itself and the process. And then the question that's going to arise is, well, since we know what the result is, that the moratorium actually passed, what's the actual motivations here? Because the rationale isn't a very strong rationale, right? Like, again, I think that the case is better if you're going to do this, to go through to say, no, we just don't want weed in our town. We just don't want the sale of marijuana, recreational marijuana in our town. Period. That's the argument you make, and you say what we really want to do is go through the ban process, but the ban process is going to take a while. So what we're going to do is just institute the moratorium now, because we can get it done in like 2 weeks. Whereas with a proper ban, you have to go through a referendum process, and that might take months. So, or do some sort of public ballot measure, which is a really difficult thing to do. So in this case, again, the rationales are so weak that they can be used to argue for both sides. They could be used to argue that the moratorium is stupid, you should just allow the sale, and they could be used to say the moratorium is stupid, we should just ban the thing. Right? Or that we're only doing the moratorium so we can achieve the exact same effect as a ban. And by the way, this is the argument that Sal makes. This is not only the argument that Sal makes, but it's kind of the implication that the entire room was making. And I'm only using Sal as an example in this next video because he was the one that was most explicit about his motivations and his intentions. I think everyone else was still kind of at least beating around the bush, but Sal makes it clear that he really wants a total ban on marijuana.
So my thing is, whatever it is, let's ban it now. It's going to be through the moratorium. It's going to be something else, because it does not contribute to society in any shape or form based on my knowledge. Denver is going down. California is going down. You go to New York City, you get out of the Grand Central. It's like a Jamaica. You can smell this thing all over the damn place. True. If you want to bring this town down, let's have a dope.
His arguments aren't wrong, right? His arguments aren't wrong. Like if you want this thing out of here, then the only argument in favor of the moratorium is to have the effect of the ban, but much sooner, but without having to go through the process that would create that ban, right? Like we could just perpetually amend the moratorium to be extended another year. We could just perpetually do that. The arguments in favor that were presented in favor of the moratorium are so poor they could be used to demand a ban outright. And they could also be used to say, no, we shouldn't be having this. And in the end, the town council went with Attorney DeBella's outright recommendation, which he says he didn't want to do, but he was asked to make the recommendation, and he's the town attorney, so he was asked to make the recommendation, so he met his request, and his recommendation was the moratorium.
My suggestion, and again, I don't make policy, is we do a short ordinance stating that the sale of the establishment of a cannabis establishments or cannabis establishment shall not be permitted for a minimum period of 1 year, subject to revisit by the town council.
And that would just be recreational, right?
Yeah, recreational.
And, in the end, the vote was bipartisan, 8-1, and you might actually be surprised who the one vote was.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
There it is. Like I said, the arguments are so weak they could be argued for on either side. Sal was the lone wolf here. This is how poor these arguments are. And if you think this is just a rug pull, right? Like as soon as it becomes legal for it to be sold at the state level, then this is just a rug pull to make it not happen. Then there's a public hearing tomorrow night. And again, if you're not able to go there in person and, speak your mind here on this matter, then you can watch from home. But again, you won't be able to participate in the public hearing, which starts tomorrow night at 6:30. So be there or be square. Get there on time, sign up, because you do have to sign up, or you won't get your opinion in. Now, it may not convince anybody, but one way or the other, but, that's your opportunity. That's your opportunity to affect your life and your government. You have direct access to these people at the local level, right? And I showed you guys the link to the agenda. Again, I don't have the actual ordinance in front of me, but I would imagine the way that Randy drafts ordinances, when he says a very short ordinance, I would imagine it's going to be 1 or 2 sentences, which is the kind of ordinances I like because they're ridiculously easy to read. They're accessible. They achieve the one thing. They set out to do one thing. They achieve the one thing. If you think a moratorium isn't enough and would rather begin the process to see a ban, see above. Go to the town council meeting tomorrow night. Make sure you're there. It's by 6:30 for the public hearing, and say, no, listen, this is a scourge on our community. We don't want any sales. Period. Right? Now, I don't think that this moratorium is going to be popular at all. So this is a huge part of why I'm doing this video, because I would rather see an ordinance passed or rejected with more than 5 people in the room, because that's what we're going to see here. That's what we're going to see tomorrow night. We're going to see, like, if I don't do this sort of thing, if I don't talk about this, we're going to see no more than like 5 or 6 people in the room who aren't the elected officials and me and Stephanie, who's, the recording secretary who's paid to be there. Right? Right? Like, what matters when it comes to being governed is that there is consent. And I'm sorry, but I hate ordinances getting passed through a process where in the end, what's deciding whether or not to pass these ordinances, right? What's deciding whether or not there's going to be actual input on these ordinances are the same 3 people that go to these meetings. This is your opportunity, folks. If you guys want to affect change, the local level is where that happens, right? If you guys want to make damn sure that this never gets through, that in the sale of the recreational sale of cannabis products never gets through, then let them know. Let them know. And then in 4 months, they may revisit this and say, you know what? The community was really outspoken. We had 100 people in that room, and like 80 of them were there saying, we don't want this. Don't ever do this. Let's start the referendum process to turn this into a complete ban, right? Or, maybe we have 100 people in the room and 70 people are opposed to the ban, to the moratorium, and the town council and enough people in town council say, you know what? Like, rule by consent of the governed, like, that's an awful lot of people to take time out of their night to come to this meeting and say, don't do this, right? So, whatever your take is, you have the opportunity to present it tomorrow night. And I'm here right now. So, like I said, I would give you my take on that note. The burden of proof is in the positive claim. That's an axiom. That's an axiom of logic. The burden of proof is always on the positive claim, not the negative claim, which means that you have to give me a reason for it to be illegal. And you presume that it's legal. This is actually the entire framework of our system of governance at every level in this country is based on that idea, right? That if it's not expressly illegal, it's necessarily legal, right? And if you're going to make something illegal, the onus is on the person who's arguing in favor of it being illegal, the thing being illegal, to produce a rationale for the thing to be illegal. And by the way, so folks know, yes, I'm a crazy libertarian. I think you guys all know where this is going, but I am not a fan of marijuana, right? I don't think it's a scourge on this country in the way that, say, crack, meth, and heroin are, or, God forbid, God, what's the one that everyone's dying of right now? Let me know in the chat. I'm stumbling here, so you guys got to help me out here. What is the drug that just everyone's dropping dead of? Guys, let me know in the chat so I don't look like a complete idiot. I can't believe it's escaping my mind. But I don't think it's the scourge of that. But it is absolutely the surest indicator of degeneracy, right? I get it. There's a time and a place for everything. And it's called college. And we were all in college and we were all young and did stupid things in college. And then when you graduate, it's time to become an adult and do away with childish things, right? So, I'm not a fan of marijuana broadly. There are genuinely legitimate medicinal purposes that it serves. Now, this isn't the Joe Rogan experience where I'm going to tell you it's some sort of magical snake oil cure-all for absolutely everything, and will cure everything from back knee to your credit score, right? So I'm not Joe Rogan. I'm not going to say that about weed, but I'm broadly not a fan of it. It is the surest indicator of degeneracy. It's the shopping cart thought experiment. It's a perfect analog for the shopping cart thought experiment. There are very, 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 very few things you could be doing with your time that are less productive than getting high, right? And no, I'm not here to tell you that the PSAs are right? You're going to go shoot somebody up on weed, right? No, you're not going to be driving 800 miles an hour in a stolen Hennessy Venom, right? On weed. No, there's one PSA that got it right. There's one PSA that got it right, and it was the one where the girl is, smushed like a pancake and flattened up against her couch, right? And what could you be doing with that time instead of just getting high, right? Now, again, let's not kid ourselves about the thing. It's not like alcohol in a certain way, which is, I know in a vacuum, alcohol by itself is a worse drug, right? For you, right? But at the same time, there's no having a beer with a steak dinner, where you're not going to be even the tiniest bit drunk on that one beer, right? Let's be honest. Nobody's taking half a hit, right? And saying, oh, that's why I bought that weed. I bought that weed to go half a hit, right? And we've got an article coming up that's going to kind of demonstrate that idea, that concept, right? You smoke weed to get high, right? The overwhelming majority of recreational users, not the overwhelming majority, all of the recreational users, if we're not kidding ourselves, are smoking to get high. Right? It's not like there's, penne alla vodka. You mix the vodka in with the penne sauce and you make this delicious meal, and there's no actual alcohol in the finished product, but the cooking of that alcohol into the system adds something to it. The cooking of the marijuana into the brownie just makes you high, right? There's no flavor that it's adding to the thing. In fact, every human being I've ever seen make edibles in any way, the goal was to find some way to weed out, pun intended, the taste of the weed, because you're usually buying crap weed for something like that. There's no sense, spending good money on good weed for something like edibles. Right? And I won't lie too. Sal is not wrong about New York City becoming an S-hole. But marijuana is probably a symptom in that case and not the cause. And the real question here isn't, is it good or is it bad? The question is consent of the governed. The question is a matter of devolution. The question is, where is the consent in this whole situation? Right? We're talking about potentially a legitimate small business owner who's taking on a huge amount of risk indebted into the state, right? to open up this small business in New Milford. Again, it's not a heroin shop. It's not a crack shop. It's not a meth shop. It's weed. I don't like weed. But again, it's not heroin, you know? You're never, ever, 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 ever going to OD on weed. The question is a matter of devolution. Now, the victimless crime argument, guys, don't get into that. That's a really, really weak argument. The question at hand is a matter of consent, right? And again, I wouldn't say this about all drugs, technically. Like, I wouldn't say where's the consent when it comes to heroin or when it comes to crack or in some cases PCP, because there may be secondary effects that the drug has on you even when you're sober, like that it takes away your agency. It takes away your capacity to consent in the first place. So, like, there may be a legitimate, even libertarian argument to say, no crack, meth, or heroin, period, right? And when it comes to devolution, by the way, this is how you have consent. How do you know you have consent of 330 million people? What are 330 million people going to agree on? Not a whole lot. So whatever government exists to oversee those 330 million people should be really small. And what it does should be really limited, because there's not much that all 330 million people are going to consent to, that you're going to have their consent to. So you devolve a lot to the states. Here in Connecticut, we have 3.5 million people. What are 3.5 million nutmeggers going to agree on? Not a whole lot. Probably a whole lot more than those 330 million people, but not a whole lot more, right? So then everything else, when it comes to the system of governance, gets devolved, because we don't have counties in this state. We de facto don't have counties in this state. Gets devolved down to the town. Well, there's almost 30,000 people in this town. What can 30,000 people agree on? What can 30,000 people consent to? Not a whole lot. A pretty decent amount. Not a whole crazy lot, right? Maybe that the fact that we have a mayor is something that everyone can agree to. Maybe the fact that the number of councilmen on town council is an odd number. Maybe we can all agree to that. Maybe we can all agree that the proper and appropriate term for a councilman is only 2 years. Maybe we can all agree to that. You know, and maybe there are other towns in Connecticut that wouldn't agree to that. Maybe there are other residents throughout Connecticut that wouldn't agree to that. That's why you would devolve that decision making to the lower level. What are some things that just nobody's going to agree on in this town? What are some things that should then, in terms of decision making, be devolved to the true least common denominator, which is the individual? And again, the question here is one of consent, right? And this is where what we have is, when it comes to zoning, I would apply the same concept, right? The reason that we have the private development environment that we have here in Connecticut, which looks nothing like what it is in Tennessee, Idaho, the I-4 corridor in Florida. It just doesn't look like that anywhere in Connecticut. It's not even close to that. Is because of these restrictive policies. It's because you're effectively, every time we have the opportunity for something to become legal, every time you have an opportunity to lessen these restrictions, you have something come and interfere with that consent. You have something come and interfere with a transaction of mutual consent, right? And again, zoning is the perfect example of this, where you have these incredibly restrictive ordinances that, when piled on top of each other, right, each one may only be a grain of sand, but how many grains of sand does it take before you have a mountain? And how many grains of sand does it take before it takes, instead of a few days or a few weeks, to get something through the red tape of town government? What's the point where you get to years, where your application to subdivide, tailors into two different properties so we can actually sell the actual land? Why did that take almost 2 years to take place? All we were doing was looking to have a line drawn in half, right? That took almost 2 years to get approved. And quite frankly, to those of you who are in the audience saying, this does appear to be a rug pull, it seems kind of to be the case, because even the Dems every single Democrat was even on board with this. It seemed to me, within the greater context that we've described, and from what was being espoused throughout the course of that 1 hour conversation that I'm not going through every single second of this afternoon. In fact, we're going to be wrapping up shortly. But it seemed to me like the real impetus for this was that it was just an easy way to get the same thing as a ban without the oversight and without the length of process, which is there for a reason. It's there to ensure consent. Government is supposed to be slow moving so that you have the brakes put on so that people have time to come in to get involved in this sort of thing, to coalesce either around it in defense of whatever is being pushed, or to surround it and say, no, we don't want any of this. And this is why I decided to do the show. Because I think my take is actually kind of the majority take, right? I hate weed, but I love liberty. I hate cigarettes, but I love liberty. And you know what? I can't speak tomorrow, but you can. I got to do what I got to do when it comes to the technical side of things. And it is really, really hard for me to go up there and speak. And here's the thing. I will eat my words. I will eat my words if 100 people show up and 95 of them say, Mike is wrong. I want a full-on ban. We're going to approve. I'm in favor of the moratorium because it does effectively the same thing. And in 6 months, get the ban process started. Right? And this whole concept of interfering with mutually consensual transactions and establishing this red tape process, this is the reason that this state has become such an embarrassing burden to live in. And I realize almost all of that is Hartford. By the way, keep electing Democrats, right? I realize almost all of this is Hartford, but getting in the way of mutually consensual transactions, just all it does, the only thing it effectively does is make things more expensive. And this is an axiom of the law of demand. And this is why the zoning regulations, even if you don't see it, even if the contractors aren't going to say, no, we're out of here, it's going to delay these processes. And with those delays means fewer per annum completed projects. But of course, leave it to Hearst to have, with all that we've gone through tonight, the dumbest possible take. Yes, this is the News Times, and yes, there's a paywall, and yes, I have found a way around the paywall. For those of you that have been following my Facebook page, you guys have probably seen this article. If you guys will let me know in the comment section if you want me to share this version of the article where the paywall has been broken. CT cannabis customers were surprised by prices. Really? Because I wasn't. We analyzed the cost versus other states. This sounds an awful lot like, hey, well, wouldn't you know, it's the consequences of our own actions. This could sound like, well, every libertarian in the room called this, right? Prices at Connecticut's newly opened cannabis recreational dispensaries are higher than prices at dispensaries in surrounding states, according to a CT Insider analysis of data. Could it be the $1 million that they basically have to bribe the state with to get this gilded protection status? On the first, could it be the months and months and months that even at the state level you have to go through, and the ridiculous amount of licensure that you have to go through at the state level to get any sort of approval for this sort of thing? Could it be that? Could it be that in New Hampshire, where they're set to do the same thing, they don't have anywhere near the licensure requirements? It's going to wind up costing people nowhere near $1 million to get this stuff through. There isn't the minimal $25,000 just to be heard, right? This isn't supply and demand. This is government red tape. This is interference with supply and demand. And it's painfully obvious to anyone who's been paying attention. On the first day of legal cannabis sales here, Connecticut, many customers took to social media to decry what they saw as prices higher in Connecticut than those for comparable products in Massachusetts, among other states. Weed is almost perfectly fungible. It's not just comparable. It's probably identical. Quote, finally, now I can spend $35 on a pre-roll that won't even get you high, one user said, commenting on an Instagram post by Governor Lamont. Remember what I said. Here is the proof. Here is the proof. They're just saying the quiet part out loud. I want to get high. Again, nobody is just having a beer with dinner when it comes to this stuff. It's just get high. We're just getting high, right? Like the person who drinks to get drunk. And let's not get ourselves too either, right? Like the people that are actually going out to the store and buying this sort of stuff are people who are going to be smoking every day. I know these people, I'm related to at least one of them. I'm related technically to probably 4 or 5 of them. Yeah, I know how it works. I am a millennial. I know how it works. I'm not dumb, right? And again, it's not this, again, biochemically, it's not the same thing. as getting drunk every single day. But the idea is the same in that you're not just smoking to have a little toke, you're getting high. Kevin Cranford, founder and owner of Connecticut, which he describes as a cannabis lifestyle brand celebrating the unique cannabis stylings of Connecticut, okay, a head shop, said he heard from many friends and followers about what they felt were high prices on the first day of legal sales. The perception that prices were higher may have contributed to a muted first day of sales, or it was just the first day of sales. The Department of Consumer Protection said the first day of sales resulted in $359,130 in revenue for the 7 recreational dispensaries that were open. For the record, in Colorado, I think it was like $7 million that they made. Right. You're going to be fighting with the legacy market, so the black market, where people have known where to get the product for cheaper for God knows how long. Cranford said the prices are higher than most places around here. They're higher than Massachusetts, which is right up the street for many of us. We can just go there. Remember that, because they're going to make an argument later on that is a complete reversal of this take. A review of prices online as of January 11th shows higher price points in Connecticut for almost every cannabis product. A 100 milligram package of cannabis gummies at the Fine Federal Dispensary in Stamford, for example, costs $40. A similar product also containing 100 milligrams of THC, the substance in cannabis that gets a consumer high, again, this is what we're doing here, costs $25 at Fine Federal's Dispensary in Rowley, Massachusetts, the same at the Rise Dispensary in Bloomfield, New Jersey, and $35 at Aura in Central Falls, Rhode Island. A 3.5 gram container, that's what we proverbially call an eighth, 8 gram container of flour had an online listed price of $50 at most Connecticut dispensaries as of January 11th. That's really not bad. The price of weed has not gone up and the quality has. Damn, free markets for the win, right? A similar product might cost $5 less in Massachusetts, but as much or more in Rhode Island. And prices on THC-laden vape cartridges were about $55 for 0.5 grams and $100 or more for 1 gram in most Connecticut dispensaries, on par with Rhode Island. Massachusetts, however, a similar 0.5 gram vape cartridge might cost $30, with a 1 gram cartridge running $70 or less. Adam Wood, president of the Connecticut Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, says, quote, prices will fluctuate, end quote, as supply and demand change, and as the regulation surrounding the thing changes. Hello. If you make it impossible to sell, then it will become impossible to sell. If you make it expensive to sell, then it will be expensive to sell, which means it will be expensive to buy. Because if it's expensive to sell, then you have to sell it to someone. There's a buyer. It's going to be expensive to buy. This isn't just supply and demand. I mean, it is technically an extension of the law of demand, but this isn't something that's relying on free market principles. There are currently only 9 licensed dispensaries in Connecticut authorized to sell recreational cannabis, 7 of which opened for business on January 10th, and 4 cannabis growers. Quote, you're going to go from four cultivators to potentially, depending on how things shake out, 30 or 40 plus cultivators. That's a major change, end quote. Wood said, will they though? Quote, I think retail will also generate competition and competitive pricing, end quote. The limited number of cannabis retailers and producers allowed prices to be set at a higher level than they might be, according to Cranford. Quote, if you have a built-in monopoly, first things first, there clearly isn't. There's 7 of them. And remember, do you remember when the same article argued like 5 paragraphs ago that you could just go to Massachusetts? Do they really think that there's no competition in this tiny state, geographically tiny state of Connecticut? That you couldn't just go to Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts? Right? Like even in New Haven, right? It's what, an hour and a half drive to Springfield? Leave it to the Hearst media, who is the big S, to have no understanding of even like middle school economics. If you have a built-in monopoly, which is protected by government in this case, it's a protected guild. The problem you're talking about is government. That's where it's originating from. You can put the price point higher and see if people will move for it. And then if you own most of the market, you can go down as you need to. And if the red tape wasn't there, you'd have the competition. Again, this is not an element of free market principles. It may be technically an extension of the law of, well, in this case, supply. But this isn't an extension of free market principles. They're just going to have to keep on experimenting with it. Or the more restrictive they get with these laws, the more expensive it is to adhere to them, the less restrictive it is they get with these laws. This is an axiom of the law of demand. Cranford said the higher prices may only be temporary. Prices will drop as the market begins to settle, as they did in other states. Oregon had a couple snafus early, but now the pricing is where customers need it to be. He said Connecticut is not there yet. So I guess the message from that article is, no matter where you stand on this whole thing, that the left just cannot do economics, right? William Randolph Hearst, again, is just demonstrating again, the left just don't get economics. So with that said, I'm hoping to see a whole bunch of people tomorrow night, either in favor of the moratorium or against. I'm not going to speak out because it's going to be too hard from where I operate to do that during a public hearing. I know you guys have seen me speak before. You go to the podium and speak, but it takes a lot of prep work to do that. And I really only try to reserve it for either public hearings where I'm the only one and I can easily go back and forth between the station, or situations where I'm dealing with an actual town council meeting. So, because once the meeting starts, then there's a little bit more of a rigor to the process. So it's a little bit more predictable. It's a little bit more organized, and it's easier to just take the headphones off, have a prepared speech, because I have to have a prepared speech the way I operate. Say my thing and get out of there, right? Time it, practice it beforehand, and get out of there. So we are just about at our 1 hour mark. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We're diving into Q&A. I'm going to go check Discord real quick to see if anyone's in the Discord chat. If you wanted to participate in the call-in, all you have to do, again, link is in the comments section, link is in the description. If you wanted to have a conversation with me, if you think I'm completely crazy and wrong, jump on the Discord, go into the general voice channel, and I'll pull you into so we can talk. Right? If you're staunchly opposed to my take, then let's have this conversation. Let's work it out. If you're in favor, then you can come on and work that out with me too. But in the meantime, let's dive into your Q&A, guys. Thank you. I do this for you guys. I don't do this just for me. I do this for you guys. So I really appreciate everybody that jumped in, everybody that if anybody had the guts to share this, especially into the Milford, Connecticut page, thank you so much. I don't know if that happened. And I don't hold it against anyone if they didn't. The way I'm set up, I'm a one-man show. It's too hard for me to do too much sharing. I have time to share one or two destinations, and they're the ones that I really want, because I think there are people that are interested in what I have to say in those two destinations, and that's why I do that. So let's dive into your commentary here. Ray, our most regular, Ray, salute. It should be put out to a referendum and let the voters decide, not the town council. Yeah, I'm a little I don't like the way that I don't care what the ordinance is. This process seems like there's not nearly enough process, right? I want red tape for government. I don't want red tape for the private sector. I want red tape for the government, right? Because that's the thing that ensures consent, is the red tape. So, yeah, Ray. I mean, Ray has a point. I don't know if that's the exact way to go about this, but yeah, I don't want there to be 5 people tomorrow, right? For the entire meeting, and have no input from the community. I want you guys to jump in on that. Again, for or against the moratorium. I want you guys to go to the podium. I know it can be nerve-wracking. It can be, you might shake. You're going to be on camera. You're going to have a microphone in front of you. Write down your speech, right? It's about a page and a half, size 16 font. I use size 16 so I can read it on Microsoft Word. About a page and a half. Gets you to about 5 minutes. It's about 2 pages, maybe a little bit more in size 14 if you're really quick with how you speak. Richie, Ricardo Lathers. I am Ricardo, by the way. So salutes to Ricardo, who has been a close troll friend of ours and of the channel. Give the decision to the people. Let's vote. Yeah, I would love for this to have, at the end of it all, I would love for this to have, at the very least, a town meeting, right? Where if this goes through 9-0 tomorrow night, and let's say there's a town meeting afterward, I don't know if there is or isn't. I could be wrong about this. I so apologize if there is a town meeting that's required after this. I don't know that there is. But if there is, right, and this goes through 9-0, I would so rather have the opportunity to give even my opposition, even if I was on the side of the 9, and I'm not. If I was on the side of the 9, I would want the opportunity for people to come in and say, you guys are completely wrong. There's 9 of you and there's 150 of us, and you're just wrong, and we're going to vote this thing down. Right? I would love for that to be the process here. Dan Rice, wow, this is the most incredible show I have seen. Dan's a close friend. He's out in the county that starts with an M, out in Arizona, and I don't believe I can I say the county? Can I say Baba County and avoid getting kicked off YouTube and Facebook? So yeah, Dan, appreciate it. I'm going to take that literally. Thank you so much. Dan, just got here. What happened? Dan, there's what's called the timeline bar below. Back it up. Go watch on YouTube because YouTube is better about this. Just rewind the show and watch the whole thing. Basically, the first 30 seconds we went over the important stuff. And you probably will be able to get the gist. And Dan knows me well enough that he's probably going to know what my take is on the matter. Let's see if we got any commentary here on YouTube. No, we don't. So that concludes tonight's show. I don't know when I'm going to be back. I did say that I was going to have a monthly conversation with state representative. He's not state representative anymore. With our state senator. So I'll have to be reaching out to him. Steve, if you're watching, I'm probably going to have to reach out to you and just have me and Steve have a conversation next Sunday night. Because there won't be any teams left that we give a darn about. Maybe Ray will be at home watching his Cowboys, right? And maybe Councilman Cosgrove will be at home watching he'll be at the Abbey watching his Buffalo Bills. We shall see. I'm hoping Ray's going to be with us next week, if he gets my drift. But yeah, so not sure exactly how we're going to go about that. I'll have to reach out to Steve and see exactly when a good time is for him so we can have our monthly conversation about what's taking place in Hartford, because man, is it hard for even me to keep up with, and I'm sure it's going to be hard for you guys to keep up with, and I'm sure that's stuff that you guys are interested in. So that's what you guys can have to look out for. Do look out for my Mike Reed's channel, because I basically mothballed it for about 8 months last year, and I already have 3 or 4 videos on the go, ready to go. So that will be expanding rapidly. And again, shout out to all you. I do this for you guys. I do it for free for you guys, so you guys can stay informed, because that's what I like to do, and I like to have these conversations with you. I like for me to say these things so that you guys can hold my feet to the fire. If I say something stupid, you guys have that commentary. And I hope I'll see you guys tomorrow night, 6:30, public hearing. See you tomorrow night, I hope. Good night, everybody.